Maria de la Soledad Teodora Natividad Reyes, where have you been? Why haven't you answered my calls? Who taught you to be such a disrespectful daughter? Marisol braced herself as soon as she opened the front door of her family apartment, and good thing she did, because her mother was at the ready. Marisol endured 6 heavy blows from a metal umbrella before her mother relented. Sarita grabbed Marisol and pulled her into the apartment, hugging and squeezing her daughter until Marisol made a high-pitched squeaking noise. Both of Marisol's siblings appeared to join the impromptu reunion. "Where have you been?" Mariposa shouted. "Look out! Mama wants to hit you with the umbrella," Gabrielle added. "Little late on that one," Marisol gasped, patting her little brother on the head. "Sorry, I made you all worry. I had an adventure." "Well, unless that adventure has a wedding ring and a 6-figure job, you're going to forget about it and sit down with us for dinner," Sarita said in a strict tone. "You're going to make up for vanishing for a week and frightening us." Very slowly, Marisol slipped back into her normal life. Time passed, and the Reyes family regained their normalcy. Sarita and Mariposa went back to work at the hotel. Gabriel went to school. Marisol was flying again before too long. Once in a while, she spotted a news story about the strange happenings in Detroit and Stockholm. Sometimes, passengers discussed it in harsh, conspiratorial tones. When Marisol returned to the Paradox forums on her phone or laptop, there were a few threads acknowledging that something strange had happened near a Paradox office, but no one ever seemed to have the full story. Details were missing, and explanations did not add up. It seemed as though Paradox Interactive had chosen to smear and smudge the truth, to make it indecipherable, rather than carry out a full cover-up. Sometimes, Marisol spotted a familiar username on the forums. A green dot would appear in front of Macavity116, showing that he was online. Marisol ran across Hurton a few weeks after returning home. Posting under his name Fearcat, Hurton announced his promotion to the role of moderator on the forums. He would be enforcing a new set of site-wide rules that governed the use of metafiction in stories, particularly metafiction that involved Paradox Interactive via fourth wall breaks. Bella was also active on the forums. Marisol found her leaving comments on Crusader Kings fanfiction under the name Swearlock2. Just like Marisol, Bella was a sucker for romance, who enjoyed seeing players take on the role of grand matchmaker in their playthroughs of Crusader Kings. About 4 months after the creations went back to their own stories, Marisol typed out the words of a story for the first time since Aisling came tumbling into her life. Marisol could not explain to anyone why it took her so long to start writing again, but on the same hot August day she returned to her craft, Marisol received a message in her forum inbox. The first words she had gotten from Blake since they parted ways in Sweden. "It's getting hot up here in the Mitten. How are you? Things have settled down since the investigation ended. PDX gave back my books that were stolen from the Inkwell, and I've started writing again. I wanted to post on the PDX forums when ready." "Long time no see. I'm glad things have settled down for you. I've also started writing again. I can't stop thinking about those people we sent back to their stories. Are they okay? What are they doing? Or have they just frozen in place because no one is writing their stories anymore? I want to know, but I also don't want to know. I don't think I'm making any sense." "I don't see it that way. Aisling, Trig, Ushka, Callie, the others, they're all living their lives. Nothing in their world is stopped just because we aren't holding the pen or publishing. I know you haven't been on the forums as long as me, but go to Faith in Chaos and find the comment left by a user named Saint Nylan. He figured out the secret before any of us." "What secret?" "The story always goes on. Once it's out there, there's not a force in the world that can stop it as long as there's one person reading it and thinking about it. The story goes on, even if people don't like it, or only a few people actually bother to read more than one page. Lots of stories are created that way. Sometimes your words will just brighten someone's day a little, or give them an escape from the horrible parts of life. Sometimes your words will change people's lives. The story itself doesn't have to be a work of high art. Just the act of sharing it and finding that one person out there who cares about those creations just as much as you do is all that matters. At least, that's what I took away from all of this. I'm glad I got to share my stories with you, and I wanted to say thanks for sticking to your guns and putting your own story out there when it mattered most. So what happens now? I've got a few wish fulfillment story changes I need to publish. Remember those promises we made back in Sweden? I've got outlines for the changes you promised to write, plus the outline for a sequel hook ending for the last days of the Emerald Isle, if you're ready to start. Sure. I think I can knock all of it out tonight. What do we want to do after we put a bow on all of this? I've got an idea. Sci-fi romance. A small group of hot people stuck together on a long journey in a cramped spaceship. Oh, maybe the lightspeed drive is crippled, and a trip that should have taken a day is going to take weeks or months instead. And the climate controls are damaged, so everyone has to huddle up for warmth. There's the Marisol we know and love. You want in on this new story? Yes, definitely. Absolutely. The Legend of Vetu Kealoha, Training Arc. Written by Macaulay 116, edited by Cho Senpai. December 18th, 1515, alternate timeline. Vizonia, Partogan continent. One night, shortly after the terrible fight by the riverbank, Vetu was too cold to sleep. She clambered out of her bedroll and walked around the Partogan army camp, trying to warm up. Peering across the desolate landscape, she spotted something out of the ordinary, a shimmering golden light, similar to the beacon that had been guiding her through this journey so far. It seemed close at hand, so Vetu decided to quickly investigate on her own. Moving deftly, Vetu retrieved her shark-toothed spear from her campsite without waking Tohunga Nixie, then stole into the darkness to see what this light could be. Vetu followed the golden light into the darkness for about half an hour, and finally reached her destination just when her feet were starting to hurt. It was a tree. A burning tree. Standing in the middle of an open field, a single tree was engulfed in bright yellow flames. Feeling a twinge of fear, Vetu turned to move away from it, only to find herself standing face to face with Mahuika. The goddess of fire did not move, and Vetu had to quickly stop to avoid colliding with her. Only knowledge will save your people. Mahuika's voice projected itself into Vetu's mind. You will gain knowledge by training. I will teach you. Make ready. Vetu had only seconds to raise her shark-toothed spear before Mahuika swung at her with a fistful of fire. The sparks flickered in the night, and Mahuika's flames changed color from yellow to blue. Vetu barely managed to sidestep the attack and regain her balance. Vetu gripped her spear tightly. Okay, Vetu said. Okay, I'm ready. I'll listen to your teachings. Anything to save my friends. The Stormbreakers. Victory and Retirement. Written by Cho Senpai. Edited by Macaulay 116. September 12th, 2036. Alternate timeline. Nagasaki, Japan, United Nations of Earth. Akira stood with the crowd as the victory procession passed by. It was the day after the war in heaven. The team of heroes, known as the Stormbreakers, basked in the adulation of the crowd as their victory over the beast was celebrated. Other members of XCOM, who fought with the Stormbreakers in that legendary battle, followed the main procession but were venerated by the crowd all the same. Mira Mihaka, the former chosen assassin, walked the parade route arm in arm with a New Zealand soldier. When several of the local women called out to him, Mira waved them off with a playful smile, saying, "Sorry, he's spoken for." Amidst the Stormbreakers, Akira spotted a brown-skinned girl with blue hair and purple eyes. Akira briefly locked eyes with Jericho, and a kind of unspoken understanding passed between the two young women. Then Jericho looked away. In this timeline, the time traveler known as Akira Robinson was no threat to anyone. As the Stormbreakers were borne to their places in history, Akira melted into the crowd, looking forward to a life of peaceful obscurity and quiet penance for her past deeds. Faith in Chaos. Unmasking the Enemy. Written by Macaulay 116. Edited by Chosenpai. December 21st, 1928. Alternate timeline. Mahurangi Spaceport, Aoraki, Kingdom of Partoga. 3 spaceships were flying in a low orbit above Toamami and Akira. Cargo bay doors were open on all 3 ships, and highly sophisticated camera equipment was aimed at the 2 combatants. One of the spaceships had the letters PNN written on the side. Another one had the Xenonian News logo painted on its nose cone. Akira took several seconds to take in the sight of several dozen cameras and microphones aiming at her. When she finally accepted the secret of the paradox was out, Akira put on an evil-looking smile, turned back to Toamami and said, "So many witnesses, Mommy, but you're still going to die alone." Toamami raised her pistol and aimed right between Akira's eyes. "Fine by me. I don't mind dying alone if it means I get to take a monster like you with me." 2 things happened at once. First, there was a very loud crack of gunfire, and another spurt of blood erupted from Akira's right shoulder. At the same moment, Toamami heard a familiar voice shouting at the top of their lungs, "Mommy, you are not alone!" Sebakira and Erika erupted from the ruins of the spaceport terminal and tackled Akira. Toamami raised her weapon to strike out, but Sebakira snarled, "Stay your weapon! This is not Akira!" While Erika held Akira in place, Sebakira enveloped her in psionic energy. After a few moments, the illusion was washed away. "I have seen this in a vision," Sebakira said. "It is all clear to me now." Toamami had to blink her eyes several times to make sense of what she was seeing. This woman she had been fighting was not Akira Robinson. It was a trick, a telepathic illusion. Colors and shapes melted across Akira's form until her face changed into something Toamami recognized. "Nia!" Toamami cried. "Nia, can you hear me?" Nia Ririnui slumped over and fell into Sebakira's paws. "The acolyte is unconscious, but she will live," Sebakira said. "Come, let us leave this battlefield in the hands of your loyal soldiers." The Last Heroes. Rescuers Reunite. Written by Chosenpai. Edited by Macaulay 116. March 1st, 2101. Alternate timeline. High orbit over Rotorua, Partogan Lavakian Commonwealth. The last time Kanti Divakar saw Varian Robinson, he was a nervous-looking boy. Now, the grandchild of Blake Robinson had embraced their true identity and looked stronger and more confident than ever before. "Welcome aboard the Starship Endeavour, Victoria Robinson," Conti said. "I can't thank you enough for offering to help me on this journey." The half-black, half-Asian woman bowed her head. She had some of Blake's features, but a little bit of her mother, Himawari, showed through in her smile. "That's the least we owe you," Victoria said. "We haven't forgotten the rescue at Cape Canaveral. I heard you needed help, and when my team got the message, well, they insisted." Victoria gestured to the airlock, where all of the modern-day Stormbreakers were boarding. Quarter Lang, the half-human, half-feline hybrid, swatted playfully at Conti, and the two shared a friendly hug. Setla Shunan was still too big to be allowed. Nainu Dokunle, all of 2 feet tall, rode atop Maui Ririnui's shoulders. Kingi nodded politely at Conti, and then stepped out of the way for the last 2 Stormbreakers. Cassandra Espinosa and her older sister Inez greeted Conti like a long-lost sibling. Tears were shed and stories were told. Inez and Cassandra had not seen Conti since the rescue at Cape Canaveral almost 20 years ago. After the Stormbreakers made themselves at home in the crew quarters, Conti invited them to the captain's quarters where she lived. Together, the group watched the latest Kiri and Mina spy movie on the big screen, while Cassandra tempted everyone with her latest home-cooked dessert, Michigan-style apple pie. When served with ice cream, the treat was simply decadent and worth every bite. Tomorrow, the happy group of friends would take command of the expedition to seek out a new homeworld for the Vanian people. Macavity 116's Guess the Author entry. What is your story? Written by Macavity 116, edited by Chosenpai. Meanwhile, in another timeline, Ushka the Water Witch tried to make sense of the situation, pacing back and forth in her underground hideout. Somehow, a man called Nathan, an inhabitant of a completely different world, had been pulled into the place where Oighir had met his end. Nathan from Brooklyn watched as Ushka paced the length of her hideout, and after a few moments, he dared to speak. Look, crazy Irish lady, maybe we can hash out the solution over if we, I don't know, talk to each other? I'll go first. I'm Nathan Hiles. I'm a window washer. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I got 2 brothers. I got pushed into the subway tracks by a crazy dude, and I was trying to get out before the train came, and then BAM! You're here, pulling my arm, talking about dead guys and magic. Now, why don't you tell me who you are? What's your story? Ushka tapped her dowsing rod in annoyance. Well, if you must know, I am Ushka of the Brotherhood. I made a pact with the goddess of water to command the seas in her absence during this time of civil war amongst the gods. And the sooner I resolve this crisis brought about by the death of my friend and your subsequent appearance, the sooner I can fulfill my pact and go home. Now sit there and let me think. Nathan took a moment to digest Ushka's story. He looked around the hideout, examining the many broken magical objects, including several dowsing rods. Look, lady, I don't know if I can do anything to help you out here, but I want to go home too. So how about we start over? We can help each other. He extended one hand toward Ushka, who stared at it for a moment before returning the gesture. That is preferable, Ushka said. Let us start a conversation this time, and save the interrogation for our enemies. Stardew Valley. Happy Days Ahead. Written by Macavity 116. Edited by Chosenpai. Solitaire Farm. Day 1 of spring, year 2. Alternate timeline. 7 a.m. Emily sat in the grass, giggling and laughing as Dog ran circles around her. The German shepherd wagged his tail and waited impatiently for Emily to throw the ball again. It barely left her hand before Dog was off like a shot, tearing across the potato fields like a furry missile. The creak of the front door caused Emily to look around. Blake was at the farmhouse, gathering his tools for the day's work. "I had another dream about us last night," Emily said, standing up. "We had climbed to the top of a crystal tree, looking down on the most lush and beautiful meadow. I keep having this dream. I don't know what it means, but I feel that it's a good omen." "I think so too," replied Farmer Blake. "I've had nothing but good fortune since you came into my life." Emily blushed, turning as red as her dress. Blake was about to head off into the field when he turned around and said, "I noticed a new book on the shelf. Are you preparing for the days when we'll get to read bedtime stories?" "Yeah," Emily replied. "I don't know when those times will come, but I know I'm ready for them now." Blake put down his tools and approached Emily. He swept her into an embrace. "Happy New Year, honey," he said. "Let's make this a special one." "Date tonight?" Emily asked, thinking she understood his meaning. "A special date?" "Definitely," Blake said. "Secret woods after 10 p.m. sound good?" "I'll bring the sleeping bags. You get the tent," Emily whispered to her husband, nuzzling his face. Dog got their attention by bringing the ball back. While Blake returned to his work, Emily played fetch with Dog, thinking about just how much she loved this new life on Solitaire Farm. Year of Hell, Paradise Found, continued. Written by Cho-senpai. Edited by Macaulay 116. Kali Takara, Alari Armed Forces. Ratia Alaria. Stardate 2257.03.15. 1640 hours. 15 days after the Year of Hell. Alternate timeline. Kali, Dak, and Mocha got a moment to themselves a few days after returning to their homeworld. After the year-long nightmare Kali and Mocha were subjected to, Dak insisted on pampering his wife and sister as much as possible. The first stop on his relaxation tour was the spa. Mocha was still recovering from her extensive head injuries, and a weekend of deep relaxation turned out to be just what the doctor ordered. Dak wanted to cater to Mocha's every need, but Kali and the staff convinced him to stand down. Mocha's mood and health improved steadily over the next few days, much to Kali's delight. 3 weeks after the Year of Hell ended, Dak, Mocha, and Kali spent some time at one of the largest bathhouses in Ratia, left behind by the pre-revolution aristocracy. While a team of specialists saw to Mocha, Dak and Kali withdrew to a sauna. Kali felt she could have sat there in the clouds of steam for the rest of her life. She had not felt this good in over a year, but the best feeling came just 5 minutes before it was time to get out of the sauna, when Dak lowered his guard and leaned on Kali's shoulder. She held her husband in place, knowing he had much more than earned this moment. When Kali and Dak went to find Mocha, they learned she had taken up one of the beanbag chairs in the lounge. Mocha had borrowed nearly a dozen books from the shelf and built a miniature library on a nearby coffee table. "Have you ever just dropped everything to read a book?" Mocha asked. "I don't think I've done that since primary school. I think I just realized how much I missed reading." Dak and Kali both wanted to sit down in the squishy chairs and read a book with Mocha. But Callie needed to grab something first. "If I don't have some coffee soon, the caffeine withdrawal is going to kill me," Callie said. Minutes later, Callie returned with an iced coffee in hand. She rejoined her husband and sister-in-law. The trio was so happy to be together again that just sitting around reading books over each other's shoulders had become their idea of a wonderful time. Song of the Solitaire, Where None Will Ever Find It. Written by Macavity 116. Edited by Chosenpai. Meanwhile, in another timeline, the mercenary warship Resonance Cascade emerged from hyperspace. In the ship's galley, the ever-helpful robot known as Chef announced the arrival to the crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to announce we have arrived in high orbit above the supermassive black hole cluster known as Balcora. You should consider yourselves lucky, as this is, without question, the most inhospitable region of the galaxy. You should hear the ship's navigational AI complaining right now. I swear it's going to—" "That's enough, Chef. Thanks for letting us know," said Captain Cantor. "Kids, we'll do this when you're ready." Trig and Tenna stood up from the table. "Now," they said together. "We'll do this right now and not a moment later," Tenna said. Ponico, the elderly mercenary and Trig's mentor, stroked his beard and hummed approvingly. Trig, Tenna, plus 2 members of the mercenary crew floated down 2 decks and reached the airlock module. After half an hour of donning spacesuits and pre-flight checks, the team was ready for their spacewalk. The airlock was depressurized, and the teenagers were tethered to the adult mercenaries for safety. Tenna was attached to Selborne, the only female member of the Resonance Cascade's crew. Trig was tethered to Tactical Officer Rulan, the brains of the mercenary outfit. Moving slowly and carefully, the foursome exited the Resonance Cascade and found themselves looking at a vast, golden sky. Selborne let out an awed gasp that briefly fogged her helmet. "Somehow, I imagine the center of the galaxy to be, well, not so bright," Selborne commented. "It's really too bad we can't get closer and chuck this thing into an event horizon." "We can't do that without risking the ship," Rulan said. "This is the best we can do." The Balcora supercluster contained more black holes than Trig could count. This region of space was extremely difficult to enter, and leaving again would be equally difficult, but both he and Tenna agreed this needed to be done. The group traversed the Cascade's hull until they reached a cargo bay. Rulan opened it. "If my calculations are correct," Rulan said, "once we push this thing off, it will be caught in the gravitational tides of the supercluster and be irrecoverable for hundreds of millions of years. If we do this, no one will ever see it again." "Good," Trig and Tenna said. "Don't forget the proximity mines," Trig added. Rulan flashed the thumbs up and pushed a button next to the cargo bay doors. The hatch swung open, and a moment later, the contents of the cargo bay were blasted into space. The reality perforator shot away from the Cascade and into the void, surrounded by a cloud of anti-starship space mines. Trig reached into the cargo bay and retrieved the last 2 objects, a pair of signal buoys. They were powered by radioisotope thermoelectric generators and were designed to last for thousands of years. Trig activated one signal buoy, and Tenna turned on the other. Then the teenagers tossed the miniature satellites into space, where they began to broadcast their warning message. As the Resonance Cascade retrieved its crew and prepared to depart the region, the 2 signal buoys would go on to repeat their warnings in every known language. If, in the distant future, they ran out of power, the warnings were repeated in physical form, etched into golden plaques mounted on the sides of the little spacecraft. Their grim warnings said this: "There is nothing of value here. This is not a place of honor. What is here is dangerous and repulsive to us. The danger is still present in your time as it was in ours. Shun this place. Leave it. Do not take anything found here." Trig and Tenna went to the crew lounge to be alone, while everyone else prepared the cascade for hyperspace. Tenna collapsed onto a couch. "We did it!" she gasped. "We finally got rid of that damn thing! It feels like we've got to the end of a long journey." "I know it feels like the end, but our lives won't just stop because we've achieved some epic goal. I once heard someone say, the story always goes on, even if certain people fall out of it. We're still here, and we've got lives to live. There's still an ecological disaster on Sutheria. The Olenbar invaded a primitive world on the other side of that astral rift, and those cultists worshipping my father are still out there." Tenna reached across and grabbed Trig, pulling him toward her. "You're right, and knowing you, we'll end up being the heroes who right all the wrongs in the galaxy. But right now, I think we're two tired kids who have been through hell and deserve a break." Trig realized he was overthinking and sighed. Yeah. Let's just take a moment. Let's have this moment." Trig and Tenna held each other, looking out the window as the Balcora black hole cluster got smaller and smaller, until the resonance cascade made the jump to hyperspace, moving on to wherever and whatever the next adventure might be. Last Days of the Emerald Isle. The Things Love Does for Us. Written by Cho-senpai. Edited by Macavity116. In another time, Duke Dermot, his courtiers, and the few surviving defenders of Ulster Castle were still barricaded in the keep. They were waiting for the blue and gold warriors to attack, and had been waiting for almost 2 days. But for some reason, the strange creatures insisted on trying to communicate instead of fighting. Princess Eileen and Bishop Rectabra were particularly convinced that no good could come from monsters who dropped fire from the sky and rode around in metal carriages. But Dermot was confused. When he looked out of the windows of the upper floors of the keep, he could clearly see that the blue and gold warriors were making prisoners out of the Norse army. Once, around noon today, he had seen Jarl Ylva herself, standing between two of the blue creatures while a third spoke to her. The enemy leader was shackled, hand and foot. "Do these invaders mean to make prisoners of us all?" Dermot wondered. "Slaves, I've no doubt," Bishop Rectabra replied. The bishop talked to the group about praying for salvation, be it in this life or the next. "We must be ready for this story to end," Rectabra said. "The story always goes on, even if certain people fall out of it," Dermot muttered, staring out of the window and choosing to ignore the bishop. "Huh? What's that?" Dermot had spotted something on the distant horizon, a cloud of dust rising up from the ground. "Look!" Dermot yelled. "To the north!" Courtiers and soldiers alike scrambled to find a north-facing window. "Spears and banners!" a soldier reported. "There's a large host coming this way." "If only the wind would catch that banner and spread it out," Princess Eileen said. But Dermot did not need to see banners to know who this army belonged to. He had already spotted a powerful image that would stick with him for the rest of his life. There was a girl walking at the head of the army, just behind an armored nobleman riding on horseback. Her pale skin and snow-white hair made her look like a fey spirit. And somehow, even at this great distance, Dermot could have sworn he saw a flash of sunset-red eyes. "Aisling!" he gasped. It was. His friend and crush was leading the army of Duke Caradog to Ulster Castle. Dermot could see his cousin's husband clearly now. The Duke pointed one hand toward the blue and gold warriors, barking orders to his men. The blue and gold warriors had spotted the incoming army as well. Naturally, Dermot expected the Azure host to turn around and fight. But instead... "Are they fleeing?" Princess Eileen cried out. As Duke Caradog's army approached Ulster, the blue and gold warriors began to decamp, gathering prisoners and loading them into either metal carriages or the flying metal monsters. Then, moving out as one, the contraptions began to leave Ulster Castle and move west to the Mourne Mountains. After about 20 minutes, there was not a single blue and gold warrior left in Ulster. Dermot, shouting over the objections of his mother, ordered a sortie. He led a small group of soldiers out of the shattered wall to meet Duke Caradog before the latter arrived on the castle grounds. Dermot had been warned many times in his youth that Duke Caradog was a villainous man who was not to be trusted, and for a short moment it seemed as though the warnings were accurate. When Caradog spotted Dermot approaching, his face went through a series of expressions, only a few of which were positive. Dermot realized that Caradog was not expecting to find anyone alive at Ulster, and his own survival had probably messed up whatever scheme Caradog was working on right now. "It looks like you've survived a battle worthy of the storytellers," Duke Caradog said, looking around. "You've impressed me, boy." The Duke looked up at the keep, examining it for damage. "Let's skip the formalities," Caradog said. "I'll speak to you as though you are the lord of the castle, which you will be in just a few months' time, I am told. Duke Dermot, will you permit me hospitality in your home? I've no doubt the enemy will return." "I give hospitality," Dermot replied. He turned to one of his own men. "Give instructions to let Caradog and his men enter." While the friendly army started moving into the castle, Dermot was almost knocked over by someone running into him. "Dermot! Aisling!" Dermot hugged his friend as tightly as he could. "You got through!" Dermot gasped. "You're the best friend I ever could have asked for. I was so afraid for you." "I never would have left you alone," Aisling replied. "You're my friend. You mean so much to me." "And you to me," Dermot responded. The pair turned around to watch Duke Caradog's army pitching their tents in and around the shattered walls of Ulster Castle. "The blue and gold warriors are going to come back," Aisling said. "I don't think your allies here are enough to stand up to them." Dermot sighed. "You're right, but the blue and gold warriors are strange. They could have killed me 100 times while I was waiting for you to come back, but they didn't. Then they left as soon as they saw you and Duke Caradog. I don't know what's happening, but I think we're just at the beginning of a very strange and twisted story." Aisling leaned in close and linked her arm with Dermot's. "If that's true, I'd rather stay with you," she said. "Let's not leave each other alone again." "Agreed," Dermot said. "Whatever comes next, we'll see it through together." Aisling let out an excited giggle and transformed into a songbird, twittering over Dermot's head before landing on his shoulder and changing into a cat, purring and mewing gratefully. Then Aisling bounded to the ground and turned into a great big friendly dog that pounced on Dermot and licked his face. He burst out laughing. "Okay, I get it. You're happy. I'm happy you're happy." Aisling turned back into a girl. "My kind don't make friends with yours all that often," Aisling said. "I'm just so happy I found a friend of my own." Dermot felt as though his heart was going to thunder right out of his chest. He felt as though he never wanted to go somewhere without Aisling again, and judging from the way she was looking at him, she felt the same. Dermot put one arm around Aisling's shoulder, and she leaned into him. "Come, let's get off this windy hill," Dermot said, "and go back to the warmth of home." Aisling was so wrapped up in good feelings that all she could say was, "Yes, I'd love that."
Outspeak brave Horatius, the captain of the gate. To every man upon this earth, death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? Keeping a snail's pace, and clothe thyself with the false and vain and mortal dross. So little is our loss, so little is thy gain. So little, then eternity shall greet us with an individual joy shall overtake us. Everything that is good and divine, truth and peace and love will shine. For every man upon this earth, death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? Attired with stars, attired with stars, attired with stars, attired with stars. Attired with stars, we shall forever sit, triumph over death, triumph over chance, and you time.
This is Macavity 116. We hope you have enjoyed this unabridged production of The Broken Gates, narrated by the author. This work is copyrighted 2024 by Macavity 116. Stellaris and Crusader Kings 3 were developed and published by Paradox Interactive. Stardew Valley was developed and published by Eric Barone, also known as Concerned Ape. All characters in this story were created by Macavity 116. Copyright 2024. The song Ashes and Temples was created by Macavity 116 using generative AI at suno.com and incorporates lyrics taken from the following poems: Lays of Ancient Rome by Thomas Macaulay and On Time by John Milton.